All right. Hi, everyone. This is Mr. Kiefler. I teach at Victoria School of the Arts, and today we're talking about writing an acting resume. Now, even though we're talking about writing an acting resume, I could very easily just say writing a resume, because for the performing arts, the resumes are all going to look very similar. It's just about how the content that you fill them with changes depending on what you're applying for. So I consider myself an actor, a director, and a producer, amongst other things, in the art world and the education world for that matter. And so the resume that I'm going to show you of mine is a master resume, so a resume of everything I've done. And then depending on what you're going to audition for or apply for, you would reduce and redact things from your resume. So let's move on, because we are actually going to just do writing an acting resume. So just to go over a few of the ideas of what we're actually focusing on in the program of studies, that's the curriculum that we have to follow. The main thing we want to focus on is from the advanced acting curriculum, but this is an important skill for everybody to have in a drama program. In fact, it's an important skill to have for life, but these are just resumes that are geared towards acting and theater in particular. But things that we're going to see are different roles and career opportunities in the theater, and then at various levels in acting 15, 25, and 35, you do 3 different versions of this. Also, applying audition skills is another one that's required for all elements of advanced acting. And building and giving a resume is certainly a huge part of auditions. It's how you get them. And then transferring technical knowledge, so things that you understand about resumes to new stage environments. So I'll show you how you can take the information that you're finding in a resume or that you're putting into a resume and how that applies to a real world setting like an audition hall. So just to be clear about what we're going over, we're going to be covering some real world connections. Of course, the major one that should be fairly obvious is the fact that we use these in auditions. That being said, we're also going to use these resumes to identify some other careers outside of acting that you can be participating in. I'm just going to make my pencil a little bit smaller. Of course, the other side of the auditions is for the director or casting directors, and so we're also going to look at how these resumes are impacted on the other side of the table. How do directors use the information they find in resumes? And that actually will give you even more insight as an actor into how you want to build your resume. Of course, networking is a huge proponent of this, so we'll talk about how networking is inherent inside of a resume. And then finally, as a reflective tool. And I'll just share this right now. It's my belief that a resume is actually a powerful tool for reflection for anybody in the world, not just theater artists, but for anybody that builds resumes. It just provides you with an opportunity to really look at where you've been and where you've gone. And you think about where you started in your theater journey. For me, it was in grade 10, technically grade 7 when I started thinking about taking drama. And just the difference from going from grade 7 to grade 10, from thinking about being in drama to taking my first drama class to grade 11 being in my first show. These are examples of how a resume, when you look back on what you've done, whether it's on paper or just in reflection, how it really can motivate you as an artist to continue going forward. Okay, so here is my master resume. What that means is this is a resume that is not necessarily what I would hand in, because as you'll see is that there's 2 pages of this resume. Ideally, when you're handing in a resume, you want to hand in a single page resume with the key relevant information. Let me tell you, nobody is going to, or it's very unlikely, I should say, that anybody is going to go through every page of your resume. In fact, they might not even look at the full page. So just going back to the resume here, I want to highlight a few key points. One of them, of course, is you put your name on it. They need to know who you are. And in fact, this needs to change. So just if anything like this ever changes, you want to make sure you include those changes on your resume. I've recently changed my name. You might also run into eventually the situation where you no longer go by that name because, let's say, you become an equity member with Canadian Actor Equities Association. We'll talk about that a bit later. And there's already somebody named Neil by Kiefler in the equity. Well, you have to actually have a different stage name. So you might go by a different stage name. And again, this is something that you can just choose later on, and whatever works for you. You'll notice that I have my contact information, which I've redacted just for personal reasons, obviously, but that's how they would get a hold of me in case they were interested in my resume. And then I also have a website through a theater company that I operate, and so I've outlined it here. And in fact, there's another one that I should add, so I need to make a note for myself to add a different website. You don't need to read that. It just says add Vanguard website. So that's another website that I operate. So now going down to the other part of the resume, you'll notice that I have 3 columns here. Column 1, 2, and 3. And in each of those columns, I have a different thing for people to be reading. So for example, in the first column, these are all the shows that I want them to know that I've been in. So these are the titles of the shows that I've been in. And because this is my master resume, I haven't actually organized them in any particular fashion. I just have them in historical order, but I would just recommend, you don't need to attach a year to your resumes if you don't want to. It's more important that they understand what shows you have been in rather than what years you've been performing. Because if you've had a dry spell of some kind, they might go, well, why haven't you been performing for a year and a half or two? And if they do ask that question, regardless of years, you're going to be honest with them. But in this case, it's not necessarily important information. But let's say that I wanted to reduce my resume. You'll notice I have lots of titles in here, but some of you who know me might know that I really love Shakespeare. And so let's say I'm auditioning for the Stratford Festival. So I'm going to want to highlight in my resume all the Shakespearean productions I've been in so that they understand I have experience with Shakespeare. Now, I'm literally going to highlight them here. I'm going to suggest you probably just want to italicize them. So I might actually go through and in my proper resume that I hand into them, I would actually cut out the other titles, but I want to make sure they notice some of these. That's a Shakespeare adaptation. That's an actual Shakespeare play, more Shakespeare. This is about the stories of Shakespeare. This is an adaptation. Maybe I'll throw in this one because that's the Royal Shakespeare Company version of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. More Shakespeare, more Shakespeare. So again, and one more Shakespeare. So then all the ones that I haven't highlighted, I might actually remove those from my resume, but I put all of the titles in there. Now you will notice, you will notice that my second column is a bunch of names. These are the characters that I played in this show, and that has a connection to the same line here. So in fact, these 3 columns all connect to one another. So I have the title, the character that I played, and then we'll get to this one in a second. So in Almost Maine, I played Chad and Jimmy. So let's say that I kept that on my resume. The people auditioning me would see that and say, oh, I know those characters. One of them is a really physical role. One of them is a really emotional role. That's great. I know exactly who this person is. But just to be clear, the reason you do it in this order is that the title is the most obviously recognizable. I say Almost Maine, I say Much Ado About Nothing, I say Drinking in America, and those are shows that become pretty close to immediately recognizable. Now, there are a couple names on this list that I want to note. One of them is, I said all characters here, and then The Man, and then I also included this one, Ensemble. So most of these characters are clear character names. All characters in Drinking in America is because it was a one-man show. So you could put one-man show, but they might think, was this person a one-man show? Again, it should just be something that's obvious for when they're reading it. The man in Iphigenia at Aulis was the character name. There's no other name for it. So that's what I put down. Sometimes when we're playing in shows, we go, I've created a character for this ensemble role. So maybe I gave the man a name like Peter Jackson. Okay, great. He's also a famous director. But I gave that. I wouldn't put that on my resume because that might be misleading. They may go, I don't know that. I know the show, but I don't know that character. And you go, it was a character name. The man, and then you have to start explaining it, and they're spending more time thinking about how clever you were in your resume than you were in the audition. And then the same thing goes for Blood Wedding Ensemble. It's important to have a few of these roles on your resume because, they want to see that you can be part of a team, though, if you're always playing the leading man, that's also okay. So again, we have the title, the character, and then the last thing on the list, the company. So what company did you do this for? The producer. So back to Almost Maine, Chad and Jimmy, and I did that for Vanguard Collective, which is actually a company I started. And my directors, so there was a hyphen here, my directors were Kay Forsyth and M. Blackwell. So I actually had 2 directors for that one. You notice this one, there was a collective directing it. So again, you go through this and you realize, there's some that have directors' names, there's some that have different titles like collective. Now, what's important here is why you put down the director's name and the production company is those are the maybe less common. People don't know about those as clearly. Like some of you might not know Kay Forsyth, who's actually the drama teacher at Ross Shepherd High School. You might not know the Vanguard Collective, but you might know the character of Chad and Jimmy in Almost Maine. But let's say you did know Andrew Ritchie here. Well, I'm auditioning, and you as the director might go, oh, I know Andrew. I'm going to give him a call and find out, who this person is and how they were to work with. And Andrew Ritchie will give me a sterling review because him and I are very good friends. But that's another good note that you might not want to include the name of a director, or rather you might not want to include a production if the director and you didn't get along or if it was a bad experience, even if the director doesn't know that, because again, you don't want to create situations for yourself that aren't to the best of your fortune. Now, we're going to go down to here now, this area. You'll notice in this area, this is where I put all my directing credits. This is different only because I didn't play a role, so the main thing to notice that's different is I put the production company here, and rather than putting the director or the production company, because it's already in section 2, I put the theater that I performed it in. And the reason I put the theater that I performed it in is so they know what kinds of stages I'm comfortable directing on. So Eva O. Howard Theater, for example, that is a large proscenium stage versus the Free Will Shakespeare Festival, which is a large thrust auditorium style stage, versus the Second Playing Space, which is a black box style theater. So again, just wanting to give them as much relevant information as is possible. Okay, so now we go to the second page of my resume, this being my master resume. And I should make it clear, for an acting resume, I would probably cut all of this out. It would be gone. There'd be no point in including it in an acting resume. That being said, I might decide to keep all my film and voice stuff. You'll notice the titles are all the same. It's all titles. But instead of actor names, I've put what role I had. Was it the principal role? Was I an extra? You can include the character names, but because films are one-off endeavors, it's more important that they just understand sort of what size of role that you had, because unless it's, an Avengers movie, they're less likely to know what the title is. And then again, nothing different here, the production company and the director of that production. As far as related experience goes, this is still relevant to theater, but it's stuff that doesn't necessarily fall into a specific category. So I'm not going to be the artistic director for a bunch of different companies. I'm just the artistic director of one company. Again, my artistic associate with the Citadel Theater. So these are roles that you take on that have other elements of theater production roles, but that aren't necessarily fitting into a director or an actor role, because you don't do these as often. But again, this is one of those important things to note. Here's a bunch of jobs that you could have as a theater artist outside of acting and directing. You could be an artistic director, an artistic associate. You could be faculty or an instructor. You can work in an ensemble. This Grindstone Theater was an improv ensemble that I was part of. So again, these are some things that might be interesting. And again, this gives an opportunity for people casting me to go, oh, I see they've worked with these major companies. Maybe I should talk to some of those current artistic directors to say, what's that all about? Or, oh, I didn't realize that you were the artistic director of Thou Art Here. I've seen those shows before, and they're awesome, if I may say so myself. So then the last two little chunks here, I'd say these kind of all go together under accolades. So these are things that you can say to your name. The first one being training. So I divide that from workshops because training is more of an intensive thing for me. So they can see that I've spent a lot of years there. You'll notice that I'm still staying in a 3-column format again, right? So we have column 1, 2, and 3, and I'm doing that specifically so that it looks really neat and tidy. So when you go to format your own stuff, you're going to want to make sure that you format nicely. We'll see an example of where that starts to fall apart in a different resume. So you can see that I have my Bachelor of Education, my BFA, and then I'm also a certified actor combatant. There's probably a couple other things I could add to this training. I haven't reviewed this resume for a little while, but I've included my training, where did I take it, and when did I do that. I'm just going to note some people do include teachers and specific courses they've taken, and that's okay, especially if you're trying to fill your resume out. I just don't really have space for that kind of thing in my resume. but it is useful information for them to know who you've trained with, because those teachers are other references that they could contact for more information. Okay, and then again, workshops, it's sort of the same format. So instead of what was the program right here, I should use this, what was the program here, we have what was the workshop. And instead of what was the place that you took it at, who was the instructor and where did you take it? So I took a professional development through EPSB with Jerry Saddleback. I went and did some playwriting with Vern Thiessen. Grindstone Theater, just being part of their ensemble up here, I did lots of workshops with them, and etc. And then again, when did you do these? Again, you'll notice these are mostly a single year because you only do them one at a time, usually 1 or 2 days. So they're looking for how relevant is that information as opposed to how long were you in that program for. And then, of course, the last part of accolades is awards. I tend not to include these on auditions that I'm going for, but rather more on grants that you're applying for, which is another huge part of being a theater artist, is applying for grants. So that's why you might include these, and I actually do need to update that as well. And then here's the last one, special skills and interests. And again, this can be a pitfall. It's like related experience. A lot of people will use this to just talk about what they're into. So like, I'm into manga, I like fantasy football. What's important here is it's still skills that the casting director would be interested in. So improvisation is a huge skill for theater artists. Singing, dancing. Driver's license is a curious one. You might go, well, are you going to really drive on stage that much? No, this is just letting them know that you have a reliable means of transportation. And this is actually a good thing to include on any resume, to let them know that that you have a way to get to and from work, or that at the very least, if you had a car, you would be able to get to and from work. Things like dialect and character voices, that sort of thing. If you play an instrument, if you speak any other languages, these are all good things to keep on your resume. And then, of course, if you're auditioning for a character that is really into manga, then you might want to include manga on your special skills and interests, because that director will know, oh, this person has the ability to understand that stuff, and they have a background knowledge in that already, so that would help them in their looking into that character. So that's my resume. So again, I just want to point out a few key things you want to have. You want to have your name on it. You want to have contact information. You want to divide your information into the title of the piece that you were in, the character or role that you participated in, and then who did you work with, which includes the production company and the director. And then you also, I'm going to say, really want to make sure you include related experience, any education and training you've had, and special skills and interests. So those are the huge ones. So we're just going to take a couple looks at more examples here. So again, here's Caitlin True. She went to the University of Alberta. You can find this. I've included a website link. You can find all this information and all these examples from university there. You notice she's actually included some descriptions of her physical appearance because there's no headshot attached to this resume. If you do attach a headshot, there's no need to include the color of your hair or eyes as long as it's a color photo. But yeah, you want to include voice for things like musical auditions. You'll notice she has the title of the plays, the characters that she played, and where did she put that on and who directed it. Again, same thing for film. She's decided to include the names of her characters, and this is the production company and the directors. Here's her education, which she seems to have included with some workshops as well, and she's denoted that they were workshops, in fact. Again, to my mind, this starts to get messy. I mean, she's done a 1, 2, 3 format for the top half, and then when she gets to her education, you see how the formatting starts to shift around. I would just suggest that that if you were to do this, you just keep a consistent formatting. She has 1, 2 columns here, but then she has a single line for this and a single line for that. I just think that you could probably make that a little bit neater. And then special skills and hobbies, she's got that she speaks Cantonese and French. That's great, because if she's being cast in a show, they might need some French speaking or Cantonese, or they might just say, hey, say this line in French. Like, who knows? Sometimes directors get really creative. She's got some aspects of her physical health, so weight training, swimming, etc. And then, like I said, a driver's license. So that's Caitlin True. This is a recently graduated artist from the University of Alberta. So this is a resume for Jamie Kavanagh. I went to school with him, and he's now a professional actor in Toronto. And as you can see, he's done quite a lot. He's got a very neat resume. His name, So his is also a master resume I pulled from his website, which I've linked to. So he would probably cut this down if he was applying. But like I was saying, he's got his name. He has denoting that he's an equity member. That's the Canadian Actors Equity Association. This is his management agency, so his agents. And you'll notice he doesn't have any contact information. That's because you'd contact Newton Landry directly. And I think, as you can see down here, they actually have all their contact information there. So he still has all of his descriptions. Here's all the titles of his plays. Here's the roles that he played. Here is the production company and the director. You'll notice he has some asterisks here. So those are for shows that he has some extra information about that he consistently has info. So apparently he got nominated for a Dora Award, nominated for some awards that he wanted to make sure they knew about. And that's actually more information. So again, really good for them to have. And then he's got his film. So similar to Caitlin, he's got his 3 columns here: character, play, the show title, and then what was the production company and who was the director. Same thing for animation and voice, which he's decided to separate here. And then lastly, his training, which he has simplified in just into his BFA and Citadel Band program training. But you'll notice he has specific categories for who he's learned acting from, voice from, movement, and camera work. And then lastly, his special skills and interests. And then if we come over here, we'll just see he has a bit more info. He's a fantastic improviser, and he has lots of teaching and directing related experience, but he's condensed it all into a single thing. But again, you see how neat and tidy that is. He's got 3 columns all the way through, except for one section here. And it looks incredibly professional and very, very nice. And then lastly, I just wanted to show you, this is, oh my goodness, Tom. He's Tom Hiddleston. He's an actor, a film actor. So this is actually from a website. Here you go. This is his directly off of his agency website. He's got the title of the film he has, the role he played, the director, and the production company. Again, the essential information. You'll notice that for some of them, it's mentioned some of the nominations. So he has quite a neat resume. And I think when you're at this high of a level, usually your agency just does your resume for you. So you can pull this off the website. But I just want to show you the difference between his film and his acting resume. Title, character, director, same thing. And then instead of the production company, the theater producer. So just a little difference there. So that's everything that I wanted to show you. So the last thing that we have to do is your task. So we've seen all these examples. Now your task is to build your own resume. For my students on Google Classroom, I've linked for you to pull it from classwork. There's an outline there for you to start filling in the blanks. I would just suggest that you just fill in that information as best as you can and then format it. So if you already have a resume, great. I would just take an extra look at it, send it our way, just so we can see that you have actually built one. And if you haven't, I'd get started on that. It shouldn't take an incredible amount of time. No more than 1 page, though. Don't build a master resume. I would build just a simple one. You know, Caitlin here only has about 10 or 15 credits to her name, which is more than enough for what you want. And then when you get to education, I would suggest you do something like what she or Jamie have done. So again, those examples are posted on Google Classroom, where not only do you list your education experience, because most of your education experience will be at the school you've learned, but you can learn. You can say, what have you learned in acting, voice, etc. And if you've had more than one teacher, or you've had any workshop artists come in to your classroom, I would definitely put those down as somebody that you've worked with, because who knows, they might know somebody. And that is everything. So yeah, like I said, this has been how to build an acting resume. And my biggest piece of advice is try not to pad it out. Don't add too much fluff. Keep it nice and concise and simple, and you should have a nice resume to offer in your next audition. Thanks so much.